So, whose fault is it then? Who is causing the problem? Seems to me the answer is simple. It is always them. It's always them. Why do they always mess it up for us? Say what you like about the man known as Jesus of Nazareth. He caused a stir. He caused a reaction. What we know about him actually only roughly covers about 3 years of his adult life from age 30. But most people, for him or against him, agree that he changed the course of history. He turned things upside down. There are 4 accounts of his life and his death and his resurrection of those 3 years. And one is in a book called Luke, and that's the one we've been wrestling with. And as Luke introduces this young Jewish rabbi in the 1st century, he talks about his reputation. And Luke's been telling his listeners the kind of things that this young Jewish teacher has been telling his followers. He's been telling them that he's announcing good news. Good news for the poor, but a challenge for just about everyone else. He's been telling them about love, but a different kind of love for enemies. He's been giving them a way to live. He's talked about loving enemies, about doing good for all kinds of people, about praying for people, about blessing people, about giving without expecting anything in return. And this has turned a lot of his own people's expectations, because he is part of the Jewish nation, upside down, but also has challenged the Roman Empire of the day and the ideas that it promotes and sells. Luke tells us that Jesus, after wandering around some of the villages in the north of the country, then comes to a town called Capernaum, still up in the north, still far away from their capital city. And there, Luke tells us a story about someone called a centurion. A centurion is a mid-level commander in the Roman system, the army. He would have been placed in that place by a higher set of officers, probably somewhere nearby or within a few hundred miles. And he'd be operating by following their orders, but also he would be in charge of local troops. Traditionally 100, but it was always different. And those troops were for keeping the peace, for keeping the locals in line, keeping the taxes flowing, keeping the Roman system going in all these backward, far-flung places that the empire had taken control of. You'd be right, that most mid-level commanders in this system weren't that fussed about the locals. They were forced to usually live in a different country or be stationed for a while, and with these strange people and their strange ways, most occupying troops, and we've seen this throughout history, end up mistreating, abusing actually the local population. This man, though, according to Luke, seems different, because he seems to care about the people he has charge of, in particular one servant or maybe a slave. He seems to have also a good reputation with the Jewish people, the elders, because they're the ones who first come and speak to Jesus. And they, as they talk about him, say that this man loves the Jewish nation. He's actually helped to set up, to fund a synagogue, a place of prayer for the Jewish people. Well, this centurion has also heard about Jesus, about his reputation, and so he sent this message first through some Jewish elders. And that would have been pretty unusual, because the thing about being Jewish, and remember Jesus is Jewish, is that you're Jewish by birth. Everyone Jewish is descended at some point from Abraham, part of one family, one line. So it's pretty simple. There are Jews born into one of the 12 tribes, and there is everyone else, non-Jews, us. And the term for that is Gentiles. So Gentiles in these stories isn't a nation. Gentiles is just everyone else. And Gentiles were seen in that tradition as outsiders, actually enemies, them. Us, the Jews, them, everyone else. And they were the rituals, they were practices, they were social ways of living that kept them out and actually kept the pollution that was assumed that you would get in the system from the Gentiles being in contact with them. So they were to be avoided at all costs. So it's really unusual for Jewish elders to talk well about an occupying soldier, someone in charge of the troops that are actually oppressing the local people, and a Gentile, an outsider. What's also unusual is that Jesus, it seems, as far as we can work out, is going to go with them to see this Gentile. But Jesus doesn't get that far because there's another set of messengers. And they stop Jesus and they call him Lord, which is a good sign, a mark of respect. And then they say, look, don't trouble yourself by actually coming to the house. This man says he doesn't deserve it. He says he's not worthy. I wonder if he's actually being unusually, for a Roman soldier, sensitive to the whole Jewish way of dealing with things. It would have been a big controversial deal for a Jewish man, a Jewish teacher, to visit a Gentile house. So he's decided not to put Jesus in that position. Instead, he says, if Jesus just says something, says the word, then his servant will get better. And he goes on to elaborate, and he draws a picture, a word picture about how he knows about authority. He knows that when a soldier is told to do something, it gets done. When I'm reading a story like this, I like to remember that Luke is inspired, that Luke is an artist. Luke has crafted these accounts together to get a truth across. He wants me to hear not just a story about healing, but more. I'm listening, and the first Jesus followers, sitting in the Roman Empire, gathered, trying to work out what this movement meant, would have heard more about this soldier than about the healing. How open this man is, this outsider, to this ancient, foreign Jewish way of life. Luke presents a man of compassion, a man of humility, a man who recognizes that Jesus of Nazareth is and is living out something different, special, significant, real. This Gentile soldier can see in this ancient way of living, and in this particular young man, a deep truth, a reality that he can't ignore. I wonder if part of what he sees, and I wonder because this is what I see, is that somehow this man Jesus, unlike anyone else, is revealing, is announcing, is putting on show something bigger and deeper and older and more true than anyone or anything else. That this God, the same God who put this whole creation project together in the first place, is always letting his people know that he has never let that project go. That he is always at work. He's always been at work, and that work is putting this creation project back on track. And so often people have not remembered, not recognized, not seen that at work. And Jesus of Nazareth is somehow at the center of bringing that to a new and a more revealing stage. And this story, this big story, all these stories that reveal what God is doing, is bigger and for more people and for more of everything than anyone has realized so far. For everyone and for everything. Even outsiders like this man. So when Jesus hears this message, he is shocked. He's surprised. He's amazed. Now, I think there's only twice in these stories that Jesus is surprised. Jesus turns to these crowds and he challenges them by saying, I haven't found this kind of faith even in Israel. Israel is the us. Israel is the Jewish people. They're supposed to know, supposed to get it, and yet this outsider gets it. And that will be a theme in Luke's story, the outsider. And it's a theme throughout these stories of God and his people. That so often the outsider gets it when Jesus' own people, when they surround themselves with these ideas about us versus them, miss what is really going on. The people of God chose to see themselves as the blessed ones, but in actual fact God created them to be a blessing to all nations, and so often they missed the point about what God was doing, about how big and wide God's project is. This Gentile, this occupying soldier, this part of the empire machine, he gets it. I come back time and time again to try and reinforce, to try and remind, to try and gently point out to as many as I can that there is no, as far as I'm concerned, them. There's only us. So easy to draw a circle, to create a bubble, to draw a line, to divide the world up into us and them, because then I have somebody to blame. But the reality is there is no them. There's only us. We are all part of the same story, the same song, the same project, the same movement, the same extended family. Some of Jesus' hearers might have got the idea that the good news was only for them, was only for some, for only those in the club. But Luke tells us the story of an outsider, a man of compassion, a man of faith. He puts his faith and his trust in Jesus and his way. A man of humility who knows where he fits in, but who is, and this is what I hold on to, as much a part of the story as anyone else. He puts his trust, his faith in Jesus of Nazareth, in this project. And so do I.